You know the feeling when you order a back bar cooler that looks sleek online, only to find it takes up half the kitchen and can't keep drinks cold enough during the rush. I've seen a lot of people waste money on units that look great in the photos but end up being a headache when the bar gets busy. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. What makes that happen is usually a mismatch between the advertised footprint and the real-world space you have, plus temperature control that either swings too high or never quite hits the sweet spot for a busy service. That's why I spent a few days walking through a couple of small to mid-size bars that actually use the Atosa commercial shallow depth back bar cooler. My goal was to see if the promises on the listing hold up when you're pulling bottles, restocking, and moving the unit around a cramped service line. First off, the shallow depth is the headline feature. At 18.6 cubic feet, you get a surprisingly large volume without the deep chassis that most traditional coolers have. In a typical bar setup where the back wall is only a few inches away from the prep area, that shallower profile lets you tuck the unit right against the wall and still keep a decent inventory of draft beers, mixers, and bottled sodas. The real test is whether the interior space feels usable, not just a number on a spec sheet. In practice, the epoxy-coated shelves slide out smoothly, and the stainless steel top gives you a sturdy work surface for prepping garnishes or setting down trays. I could actually walk my hand along the shelves and see that the depth gives you enough headroom to grab a bottle without having to reach over a massive stack of ice. Temperature is the next deal breaker. The cooler uses a digital temperature control that lets you dial in the exact range you need, whether that's 34°F for a crisp draft beer or a slightly warmer 38°F for pre-chilled cocktails. Because it runs on our 290 refrigerant, the unit stays quieter than many older models that rely on higher pressure gases. In the bars I visited, the temperature stayed within a degree of the set point for several hours, even when the door was opened repeatedly during a busy happy hour. That kind of precision matters when you're trying to keep a large batch of draft lines consistent from start to finish. Mobility is often overlooked, but in a back-of-house that reshuffles equipment for events or deep cleaning, having casters can be a lifesaver. The Atosa comes with 2-inch casters that roll smoothly across tile and even a lightly carpeted floor. They lock in place when you need the unit to stay put, which eliminates the wobble you sometimes get with cheaper rollers. I watched a bartender push the cooler a few feet to make room for a new prep station, and the effort was minimal, no grunt work, just a gentle nudge. Now, who should actually consider this cooler? If you run a bar, CAF, or small restaurant where space is at a premium, but you still need to store a decent amount of beverages, the shallow depth plus the generous 18.6 cup capacity hits a sweet spot. It's especially handy for venues that want to display drinks behind glass doors. Those locking doors not only give a polished look, but also keep curious hands out of the inventory. The lock also helps with compliance in locations where alcohol needs to be secured after hours. For a bar that serves a rotating tap list, the digital control makes it easy to keep each keg at its optimal temperature without having to guess. On the other hand, if you run a high-volume nightclub that needs to keep dozens of kegs cold at once, you might find the 18.6 cup capacity a bit limiting. The shelves are sturdy, but they're fixed at a certain height, so you can't reconfigure them for unusually tall bottles without removing the shelf entirely. Also, while the R290 system is efficient, it does run a little hotter on the condenser side, which means you'll want enough clearance behind the unit for airflow. In a cramped backroom with no space for ventilation, the unit could run hotter than ideal and strain the compressor over time. One practical weakness that shows up once you start using the cooler daily is the glass doors cleaning routine. Because the doors are full-size glass panels, fingerprints and smudges become noticeable quickly, especially under bar lighting. A quick wipe with a non-abrasive cleaner restores clarity, but it's an extra step you have to remember between shifts. It's not a deal breaker, just a maintenance note for anyone who likes a spotless presentation. Another subtle trade-off is the weight. The stainless steel top and epoxy-coated interior add up to a solid, heavy unit. While